So when we hear this scripture reading, sometimes we use it, I'll be honest, right? We use it as pastors in our churches to make sure that everyone is getting along, right? And that's probably why Paul wrote it to the people of Corinth. That, hey, some of you are acting like you're so much better than these people, and just because you, I don't know, whatever, can prophesy, or you are teaching, or whatever, doesn't mean that your gifts are any better than anybody else's, that you need each other. But again, as we look at the bigger picture of our world today, in our communities, in our country, again, I think what an important message for us to share with each other and with our community and with our world, that we need each other. So I had the pleasure this past weekend of working at an estate sale. So my niece Allie has a new business that she has for a couple of years, I guess now. But if someone is selling their house and someone's moved into a nursing home, or however with the circumstances, she will take care of having the estate sale and all of everything that takes care of. And I usually never help out, but she needed a cashier to be there this weekend. And so I went over and helped her. And it just reminded me again, well, two things. One is, it was so good. I thought, boy, God does have a sense of humor. Because I think it was last week or the week before that I was talking about that one thing I'm really working on is just not giving my opinion right away, right? And wow, it was so difficult. She does a wonderful job, but she's my niece, right? So if people would come in, between the two of us, they would usually look at me with questions. And of course, I think I have most of the answers, so then I could just and I would have to stop myself and go, oh, well, this is my niece's, she's in charge. And the weirdest things, how weren't all us of a certain generation, you have a cash box. Where are you going to put your 20s? In the top with the ones and the 5s? No, you lift up the little tray, right? And I see some people that are, nodding, and you put the 20s underneath there, right? Or the 50s or whatever. Well, it was just one of those things that she and I had this little thing back and forth. We never said a word, but she'd put her 20s here, and then I'd go, oh, here, let me put the 20s underneath to make sure, right? And then it was just one of those things. I have to laugh, and I'd have to say, it's her thing. It doesn't matter where the 20s goes. I'm standing here by the cash box the entire day, right? But I've always done it this way, right? So just looking at those different things of how is it that we maybe unintentionally show disrespect, because afterwards I thought, boy, I was kind of saying, oh, you're not quite doing it right, by just continuing to kind of just do it my way. So it was just a very interesting lesson for me, at least, to just go, you know what, sometimes we can be disrespectful and not meaning it, and maybe for the best of intentions. I wanted to make sure that somehow those 20s didn't get lost or given away as ones or whatever. So my intent was good. I wanted her to do well and nothing bad to happen. But again, was I showing her respect by going, oh, how do you want me to do it exactly? I will do it that way. So I'm wondering if that was one word that's spoken to me. So I'm wondering, as we kind of reviewed the words with the kids, what word has really stuck with you? Some of you who have maybe been to several of our worship series in October. These words: humility, respect, compassion, kindness, love. What's your word? What word has really maybe been sticking with you? Even though we moved on maybe to another word, maybe there's one that's really struck home with you. And I hope that's the case. Or maybe each word has, I really want to think about this week. What does this mean? Because we can put our blinders on. We really can. And just say, well, okay, this is how I always do life. But then to stop and to think, well, but are there ways that I'm not showing these different qualities, which again are straight from our scriptures? So think about that. If you haven't done that yet, think about that. What's your word? Maybe it changes every day. Today I'm going to really focus on loving other people. I'm going to focus on showing respect to everybody that I meet, or whatever that is. Well, the other day when I was driving, I took a picture. Now, I usually don't do this, but actually I'm going to show you 2 times that I do this. But I swear to you, this is not something I normally do. So this is, and you really probably can't see it very well, but this is on Billman Road, so there's nobody around, right? on my way into church. I think it was last week or the week before maybe, but anyway, but I just had to laugh, and it struck me because there's all these electrical poles, right? And they go for miles and miles and miles. And I'm driving along, and not a single bird in sight. And then I go along, and then I see all these birds all together. And then if you can see it, which maybe you can't, but then if you look at the lines as you go on for the rest of the mile, there's not a single bird there. But all the birds, and again, I wouldn't even be able to begin to count how many, are on this one section, like maybe 10, 20 foot probably, maybe a little longer than that, on these 3 poles all together. Because then I was driving by myself, or else I would have shared this aloud with, poor Mark or Ben. But then the whole drive to church, I was like, oh, I wonder what they're meeting about. Because it's obviously a bird meeting, because they all were there. So I wonder what birds talk about when they meet, right? But the other thing it made me think of was how much we need each other, how much creation is made. Animals, plants, right? Flora, fauna, us. How much God has made us that we need other people. Now, sometimes it's nice to be alone, I get that. But generally, we gravitate towards each other. That we are social creatures, and we are meant to get along together, to work together. And the other thing that this made me think of was a video, a Pixar short from 2000, and it's called For the Birds. And it's these birds on this wire, but there's this bird that doesn't quite look like the rest of them. And instead of being, really open and welcoming to them, to this other bird, all the other birds, of course, birds of a feather flock together, don't respect this other bird, and then unfortunately, and don't welcome them, and you can kind of see what happens. So we're going to try something. Our friends from home, we put this in it before the church began, that if you wanted to look this up, it's on YouTube, but we cannot show it, so we are going to pause our live stream for about 3 minutes. So go get a cup of coffee, or you can watch this yourself. Make sure you come back to us. But we are going to watch, because we are inside are allowed to watch this. So we're going to watch this Pixar short called For the Birds. So I thought that was a good illustration of the things that happen, right? Sometimes that we don't show respect to each other. We aren't welcoming to other people. The only thing I don't really love about this is that he or she at the end makes fun of them also. But I do think, well, but you know what? He or she did give a feather to cover and then let the other ones all hide behind. So hopefully they all got back along together. But again, that whole idea that we are social creatures, that we are meant to be together, but sometimes we don't recognize that, and we will do everything we can to keep others, capital O, right, as opposed to us, to keep others away from us. As you know, this is a series that has different pieces to it, and that I kind of pick and choose some of the different things that we use and then make up a lot of our own content. But these were some slides that they sent along to use for social media. And I just wanted to share just a couple of these. As we live on uncommon ground, and again, I love that imagery, as we live on uncommon ground, because the reality is that common ground is sometimes not possible. What can we do to keep tending to one another as kin worthy of respect despite our differences? Kin worthy, again, that to recognizing that we all are related, we are all children of God. And how is it that we can tend to other people, even if they are completely different than us and what we believe? And then the next one is, let's just see what can happen when we turn up the volume on kindness and treat others as we would hope to be treated. And again, obviously that goes with our scripture reference, do unto others. And then the third one here is, let us continue into the unknown future with hope that we can survive, we can thrive together, no matter the outcomes of a divided world. You hear sometimes people talking about that of the election, right? And we're getting pretty close of the election. Oh, what's going to happen? How? Well, okay. I want to say, does it matter? Of course it matters, because policy and different things are going to change. For some people will be very, very much impacted. But at the same time, there are some things that we can say as Christians. God is much larger than any one political agenda. Meaning like the United States, right? Or any other country, that God is sovereign over all. And so no matter what happens on our election day, that we all can still just be God's people. And that we can continue to be showing respect to each other, or maybe not continue, but start to show respect to each other, no matter if who we voted for or not. So I told you I took a second picture while I was driving. This one was a little bit more dangerous because I was on the Anthony Wayne Trail, okay? But I was, I can't say at a stoplight because I wasn't, but there were no cars around. Did make sure that. So it took me several days in order to get this picture. Okay, so it's not the greatest because I was driving, again, and it's on the side. But this is an apartment complex on Anthony Wayne Trail. So I was going to pick up Ben from work. And I don't know if you can see or not, but there's these little narrow, like little lines that go down. Those are the windows. So if you look at, there's this whole huge roof area, those are apartments. And then even the bottom part has a window that's literally this big. And I've noticed this apartment complex before, often just thinking, wow, wouldn't that would just be, I'm not sure I would like to live there because I love light, natural light. And that would be so difficult for me to be, I think, happy there, to really love it with so little natural light. But what made me start thinking about it, again, since we've kind of been working on this series, is how much a small area can limit our thinking. So if you imagine, again, that your brain maybe, or your opinions maybe, would be in that. So here's this huge housing, but here's all you see is just this. We would call it tunnel vision, right? But that's all that you see. That would really have an effect on how you view the world. Because again, if somebody just dumped you in that apartment, just, you transformed there, you would have no idea. I could see a street, But I have no idea what's anywhere else around me. What are the people like? I can't see because this window is so small. And again, I'm maybe being a little facetious with the apartment. I'm sure it's a nice apartment, but again, thinking about that with our own vision of life. Do we have such a narrow focus? Is our window so small that we aren't allowing ourselves to see the opinions of others and ask for the opinions of others and say, okay, well, why do you think that? And why do you think that's the best course of action? And to learn from that. Again, you don't have to change every single thing, but at least you can understand it. I'm going to just, there was a really interesting statistic, so I'm going to share it some other time, but I just came back from the ABC annual gathering, and it was really terrific. Lots of wonderful speakers and preachers and Bible studies, and so I'm very excited to share that later on here in November. But I did want to share with you, I was kind of talking before a little bit about, colors, right? A little bit of the red or blue, and that it doesn't matter, again, what happens. Again, it does matter, but yet it doesn't in the respect that I hope that nothing's going to change with us. That no matter who's in charge of our, country or whoever wins the House or the Senate or whatever, that it doesn't matter, that we can work together. So I wanted to read this devotional. I think maybe some of you, if you get the UCC devotionals, maybe you already read this. But they begin with 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 2. First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for everyone, for kings and all who are in high positions, so that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and dignity. And it's a short devotional, but it continues. My wife often proclaims, we are not red people or blue people. We are God's people. These days, when she starts this sentence from the pulpit, her congregation recites it with her. We are not red people or blue people. We are God's people. It's their mantra in this extra divisive and unsettling presidential election year. It's a reminder that when the dust of the election settles, we still have God's work to do. Feeding the hungry, visiting the prisoner will go on no matter who is in the White House. It's a reminder that whatever we are doing in God's name, our call is to wrap it all in prayer. Really? Do I have to pray for those people? I sulk whenever I stumble across the passage from 1 Timothy. But this time, after my initial sulking, I used the reading as an opportunity to practice being neither red nor blue, but God's. I slowed down. I read it again. I got curious. Now I wonder if maybe Timothy means the same thing as my wife's congregation when they call out that they are God's people. Praying for our nation's leaders, whoever they may be, is our way to give them to God to manage. And if we do that, maybe we can peaceably, with godliness and dignity, go about the work of kingdom building that God has given us to do. So how do we do that? How do we do kingdom building? Well, I have another picture. So I ran across this. I subscribe to the Washington Post, and every once in a while they have like a good news story. And so this one kind of happened to pop up. So maybe you've heard about this, even if you haven't seen the picture. But Charles Boehm is the guy on the right. And he sat down in his Houston home to write his father's obituary. So his father, there on the left, Robert Boehm, died October 6th at the age of 74. He fell and he hit his head in his Clarendon, Texas apartment. And so the article goes and talks about how that he had never written an obituary before, right? Many of us just have to figure it out, right? Many of us haven't. And so he was trying to figure it out, and he did what probably some of us do. We Googled it. And to see what are some things that, people say or how do they do. And so he found some, but then he found some that to him were much more appropriate for his father. Now, again, some people would love this, other people would hate this. But at the end is where I'm going for the moral of the story, not necessarily the obituary. But he did talk about, again, his dad's irreverent sense of humor and how much life that he had. He said the article says he wrote about his dad, how his dad took up shooting in his later years, and he managed to blow not one but two holes in the dashboard of his car. He said his dad had a penchant for fashion and was frequently seen about town wearing the latest trend in homemade leather moccasins, a wide collection of unconventional hats, and boldly mismatched shirts and pants. And so he talks about various other things. If you're interested, you can read it. But then he finished it with, "We have all done our best to enjoy or weather Robert's antics up to this point, but he is God's problem now." So the whole thing, again, this article, you can see it's quite long. But he talked about then also this town. So his wife, the deceased wife, had died relatively recently, and he had had a really hard time with that. And so his son talks about Clarendon is a town of 2,000 people, and he said, and he thought, people would hopefully, especially in town who knew him, would appreciate the obituary and the humor used there, again, as an honor to his dad. But he said, I was shocked when it really started to blow up. And so apparently, I can't remember, but there's been like thousands and thousands and thousands of hits on YouTube or wherever it was. To see this, again, because it was just so kind of a different type of obituary. And again, he said, some people are going to think it irreverent and offensive, but again, I personally enjoyed it because I just thought, man, I feel like I know this guy. Like, this was not one of those just generic, but you could see the love that was there, but that celebrated his individuality. But here's why I share this with you. He says, as he wrote the obituary, Bohm said he couldn't resist adding that his dad's apartment was full of historical weapons and a selection of harmonicas that he kept on hand so his dogs could howl along and entertain the neighbors at all hours. That's not why I shared it. I forgot it that I had highlighted that part. But he also wanted to thank the people of Clarendon, which is a small Texas town apparently, for looking in on his father and putting up with his antics. He said he had a difficult time, his dad, coping with the death of his wife, and he's thankful to the people of Clarendon, Texas, for checking in. And here's the sermon take-home right here. I'd have to say, if I want anything to come out from all of this, because apparently there's been, again, kind of a sensation. This has been kind of a sensation. I'd say if I want anything to come out from all this, it's for people everywhere to support the mental health of people in little rural towns, he said. They go there to retire, then when they're old, their kids scatter and they end up alone. A lot of people slip through the cracks. And then he concludes, there are people all over the country like my dad. We need to look after them. Now again, I don't know if these gentlemen are particularly religious or not. I have no idea if they attend worship. I don't know anything about them. But again, isn't that the Christ-like thing to do? Is to look out for other people, and again, to be able to do it with a caring spirit is so important. So I'd like to conclude today with another reading. This one is actually from Reverend David Hensley, who has shared some information, like with the series, again, when they kind of share the series to kind of give pastors just kind of a starting point. And I really like this enough that I just wanted to read this, what he had shared. It's not very long, but to conclude today. He says, the church in Corinth was full of schisms and divisions. This division was seen in the socioeconomic status between different members. And it was seen in the difference between the wealthy and the poor at the communion table. Members of this congregation were even taking other members to court. The fighting was particularly fierce at times. Another point of division in the Corinthian congregation was how members of this church were placing different amounts of value on people based on the kinds of gifts they bring. Maybe we do that here. I hope not, but maybe you've done that here. Maybe you do that in your community, our community. What was the most important gift? Prophecy, spiritual discernment, tongues? For Paul, all of these different gifts were still activated by one and the same Spirit, who allots to each one individually just as the Spirit chooses. Paul provides a helpful metaphor with this congregation full of so many different people fighting with each other. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? Is it possible that a part of the root cause of our division these days comes from being unable to recognize and respect that each of us carries different burdens, different responsibilities, and different stories with us. It can be so easy to misunderstand when we interpret what someone says or does through the lens of our story, rather than being curious about the lens they carry from their story. He references Parker Palmer, who I've shared quotes from him for a long time. I've read several of his books. And he shares this. He says, Parker Palmer has many useful touchstones for conversation that has come out of the Center for Courage and Renewal that he co-founded. One of them is, when the going gets rough, turn to wonder. When the going gets rough, turn to wonder. Usually when the going gets rough, we want to run or fight or disengage completely. But the idea of turning to wonder instead directs us to sacred curiosity. Instead of thinking what he said really ticked me off, we might ask, I wonder why that led me to feel so strongly. Or, I wonder what her story is that led her to say that in such a way. Maybe the other person is a toe with a completely different perspective and role when we are maybe a finger, seeing from a completely different vantage point and concerned about something completely different than a toe would be concerned about. Paul, teaching in this part of 1 Corinthians, provides a metaphor for conflict and how to understand it with breathtaking clarity. And then he concludes, and I conclude as well. Could we imagine a world where if one member suffers, all suffer together with it? If one member is honored, all rejoice together with it. And he says, that is the world I hope for and that I stubbornly believe is possible. Amen. I hope this video brings it home to you.